They called him Ash, though no one rightly knew if that was a name or a curse left behind in smoke. He rode alone, saddle-worn and long-eyed, the type of man who left towns quieter than he found them. Dust clung to him like memory, and his hands, when not resting near the butt of his colt, stayed buried in the pockets of a duster faded to bone gray. Somewhere along the trail, he'd picked up the look of a man who'd seen the world through the bottom of a grave. He came down from the Wolfjaw Mountains in early October, the air high with rot and old leaves. His horse was half-starved, ribs like fence posts under the hide, but it bore him without complaint. The last town he passed through was called Red Crossing. It had no church and no doctor, only a boarding house that sold weak whiskey and strong girls, and a sheriff who hadn't pulled his pistol in 10 years. Ash said little, slept with his boots on, and left before sunup. The wind smelled of iron. They didn't know him there, not like he'd been known once. Not like they'd known him back in Juniper Hollow. Years ago, Ash had a wife. Her name was Cora, and she'd spoken in a voice that could tame dogs and men alike. She wore her hair long, not for vanity, but because she claimed the land liked it that way. Said wind needed something to touch that wasn't rough bark or sharp stone. She'd been the kind of woman to plant saplings on a hillside the same week she found out she was with child. They lived in a cabin just south of the hollow, along a bend of the Pecos River where it narrowed enough for crossing. He'd built it with his own hands, raw timber and stubborn sweat. It wasn't much, but it held warmth. They'd had a boy named Eli, born during the frost-rain season, red-cheeked and loud-lunged. For a while, Ash had believed he might grow old there. A rare thought, given how he'd come up. His father a drunk who gambled away cattle deeds. His mother buried before he'd grown tall enough to reach the stew pot without standing on a crate. Then came the Carrick brothers. They rode in from the south, 4 of them, each meaner than the last. Old man Carrick had rustled half the cattle in Rio Abajo before he died belly up in a poker house. His sons carried on the trade with interest. They called themselves ranchers, but what they ran was blood business. If you fenced land they wanted, they torched it. If you said no, you vanished. If you fought back, they brought more men. Ash had warned them off when he found Carrick's stock grazing past the old mesquite line, told them they were too close to home. He wasn't looking for trouble, only keeping his land clean. The youngest Carrick, Boone, had laughed and spat near Ash's boots. Next day the barn was in flames. The day after that, Ash rode out to the sheriff's office. By then, Carrick's already had deputies in their pocket. A week later, Cora and Eli were gone. Cabin burned. No bodies. Just ashes and a half-melted toy horse left behind in the blackened remains. Ash buried what he could, packed the rest, vanished into the hills for 2 years, chasing rumors, tracking signs like an old hound with fire behind the eyes. Folks say a man can only be broken once. Ash didn't believe that. He'd been broken, then reforged, then broken again. He'd become something else. A cold shadow with a long memory and no one left to warm it. When he returned, it was with scars no doctor had sewn and a look that made barkeeps clean glasses twice before speaking. He never told what he'd seen out in the Badlands, only that the Carricks weren't finished. Not yet. Not until their blood had watered the same dirt they'd salted. Now Ash rode toward Oxblood Ridge, a place he'd only heard in whispers, a place men mentioned when they thought the devil himself had taken interest in ranching. That's where the Carricks had built their stronghold, fenced with bones, some said, guarded by mercenaries who killed for pleasure more than coin. Ash had no illusions. He wasn't marching toward triumph. He was dragging his sins to the place they were born. There be no redemption in it, no reunion, only reckoning. He stopped outside a burned-out way station as the sun dropped like a hammer. He tied off his horse, moved slow, watching the horizon. Coyotes howled. A fire smoldered inside the ruin, fresh, not old. He moved close, silent as wind. A girl no older than 12 sat by the flame, wrapped in a blanket too big for her, barefoot, eyes wide. Ash didn't speak. He simply sat across from her, hands loose but ready. She stared. "You got death on you," she said. He nodded. "It follows. You going to Oxblood Ridge?" "I am." "You going to kill them?" "Oh, yes." She studied him. "Take me with you." "No. You'll die alone." "I plan to." She shrugged, pulling the blanket tighter. "My pa said you was already dead. They just forgot to bury you." Ash didn't answer. The fire cracked between them. Next morning she followed anyway. He never told her to stop, never asked her name. Just rode west, and she came behind, barefoot, determined, silent. By the time they reached the skeleton wash, she'd stolen a knife from his saddlebag and cleaned it better than he ever had. Ash said nothing. He remembered another child, another set of small hands, another fire. He rode on. There would be 4 men at the ridge, maybe more, all killers, all of them Carrick by blood or by coin. But Ash had ridden through worse for less. Now he had nothing to lose and no one to save, only a trail of fire to leave behind. And perhaps, just perhaps, a shadow to follow in it. The land grew meaner past skeleton wash grass, gave way to hardpan, pockmarked with thornbush and cracked stones. The girl rode silent behind him now, atop a sway-backed mule she'd bartered from a passing peddler while Ash wasn't looking. He hadn't given her permission, but he hadn't stopped her either. She rode with the blade across her thigh, easy in her hands. Ash said little. Every mile nearer to Oxblood Ridge carved deeper lines into his face. His mind turned not on glory, not even on justice, but on the slow grind of inevitability. Some debts couldn't be paid in coin. Some wrongs required blood. By the time they hit the old cattle trail, the sky had bruised purple and the air reeked of rot. The ridge loomed ahead, black against the half-light, its crown bristling with dying trees like a giant's crown of thorns. Smoke spiraled from somewhere up top, thin and constant. A settlement, if you could call it that. Ash knew better than to ride straight in. Men like the Carricks didn't live behind open gates. They built choke points, sentries, layered traps like a rattler guarding its nest. He steered them toward an old arroyo that wound close to the base, hidden from the trail but open enough for an escape if things went foul. That night they camped in a hollow. Coyotes barked not far off. The girl sharpened her knife with careful, deliberate strokes. She hadn't asked again to be part of the fight, didn't need to. She was already inside it. Ash watched the edge of the camp, hand on his revolver. "What's your name?" he asked finally, voice low. She didn't look up. "Ruth." He nodded once. "Sleep if you can, Ruth." She curled up near the coals, knife under her hand, eyes half-lidded but awake. Ash didn't sleep. His mind walked backward through time, past the cabin, past the fire, past even Cora's face, the way her hair caught the river light. He remembered the first Carrick he had killed out in the painted desert, how the man had begged. Ash remembered not mercy, but how easy the trigger had been to pull. When the first shot cracked in the dark, Ash already had his pistol up. A shadow fell near Ruth. He fired once and a man hit the dirt, gurgling. Another moved from the ridge above, rifle in hand. Ash Dove, rolling across the hollow, felt the sting of a bullet tear his coat. He fired again, short and mean, caught the man in the gut. The girl didn't scream. She slid back, low to the ground, moving toward the mule where a second knife was hidden under the saddle blanket. Ash covered her, picking off another figure slipping between the rocks. After the noise died, they dragged the bodies into the arroyo. 3 men, leather vests, cracked boots, pistols worn from use, no badges. Ash stripped them of ammo and supplies, tossed the guns into a ravine. "The scouts," he said. Ruth wiped blood from her cheek. It wasn't hers. "They know we're coming now," she said. Ash smiled, the first in years. It was a grim, broken thing. They always did. By dawn, they moved toward the ridge, sticking to the folds of the land. Ash's coat was darker where blood had soaked it. Ruth rode ahead, scouting like she'd been born to it. A raven circled overhead, black against the copper sky. Closer to the ridge, the land broke into canyons. Carcasses hung from the trees, deer, cattle, sometimes men. Warnings. Ash didn't flinch. He'd long since accepted that fear was a luxury men like him couldn't afford. Ruth stared straight ahead, face blank. They came upon the first gate by midday. A rough fence of timbers and wire, guarded by 2 men and a boy no older than Ruth, shotgun too big for his hands. Ash motioned for her to stay low. He walked up slow, hands visible, gun belt hanging heavy. One guard stepped forward, hand on his holster. "Turn around, old man. Ain't no work here for your kind." Ash stopped a few paces away. The wind shifted. Behind him, Ruth crouched behind a thorn bush, watching. "I ain't looking for work," Ash said. The guard sneered. "Then you're looking for a grave." Ash shot him clean through the eye. The boy dropped his shotgun, scrambling backward. The second guard fumbled for his pistol, but Ruth was faster. She threw the knife Ash had given her, burying it in the man's throat. Silence fell hard. Ash moved past the bodies, kicking aside the dropped weapons. The boy was still alive, shaking, tears streaking dust on his face. Ash looked down at him, cold, impassive. "Go home," he said. The boy ran without looking back. Ash retrieved Ruth's knife, wiping it clean before handing it back. "You didn't have to kill him," Ruth said quietly. "He would have learned to shoot better," Ash answered. They passed through the broken gate into the ridge proper. The settlement was a handful of cabins clustered like scared animals, backs to the mountain. Men stood outside with rifles. Women and children peered from windows, hollow-eyed. Ash counted 12, maybe more, too many for a straight fight. He turned to Ruth. "This ain't your fight, it's mine." "I'm staying," she said. Ash nodded once. There was no time left for soft words, no space for second chances. He checked his guns. 5 rounds left in the Colt, 2 more in the other. Enough if he was careful. The Carrick house stood at the center, a sprawling mess of nailed planks and scavenged stone. From its porch, Boone Carrick himself watched them approach, hands easy on a shotgun, face split in a lazy grin. "Well," Boone called, "look what the crows dragged in." Ash didn't answer. He just kept walking. The long road to this moment had been carved in fire and grief. There would be no turning back now. Ash kept walking, boots steady in the dirt, until he stood 15 paces from the Carrick house. The settlement behind him had gone quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Boone Carrick stepped down off the porch, slow and smiling, shotgun tucked easy under one arm. He was taller than Ash remembered, thicker too, with a scar across his cheek that hadn't been there the last time they crossed paths. "You look worse than I expected," Boone said. "Heard rumors you turned ghost. Guess that was just wishful thinking." Ash stopped with the sun at his back. Ruth held to the edge of a cabin nearby, crouched low, eyes on the windows. "You burned my family," Ash said. "You burned the only thing that ever made me believe in mercy." Boone snorted. "Your woman was stubborn, pretty but stubborn. Should have just sold and walked away like the rest. Could have saved yourself a long ride." Ash didn't blink. "Where are the others?" "Egan's out rustling. Jude's drunk under a tree somewhere. Sailors, he won't be much help. Not since you carved him open last spring. You remember that, don't you? Out by the trading post." "I remember." Boone's grin died. "What I don't understand is why you came walking up like this. One man, what are you planning? Some kind of righteous suicide?" Ash drew. Boone fired first, but Ash was already sideways, the round catching empty air. Ash's bullet took Boone high in the chest, not enough to kill, but enough to drop him. The shotgun clattered as he hit the ground, gasping. The sound of the shot tore the silence open. Doors slammed. Men scrambled from behind cabins. Ash turned and fired again, catching one in the neck. Ruth moved fast, low, blade in hand. She ducked behind a rain barrel as bullets sprayed the dirt around her. Ash dragged Boone behind a pile of stacked lumber, pressing the muzzle of his revolver against the man's temple. "Where Cora?" he asked. Boone coughed blood. "She died long time ago. Smoke got her." "You're lying." Boone grinned through the red. "Does it matter?" Ash fired. Boone went still. The next man came in hard from the side, rifle swinging like a club. Ash took the blow across the shoulder, staggered, turned, and fired into the man's gut. Another bullet clicked dry. Only one round left. He ducked behind the pile, checking the chamber. Ruth ran to his side, dragging a dropped pistol. She shoved it into his hand, mouth tight. "They're circling," she said. "I know. We can't stay here." "We won't." Ash rose and fired 2 shots. One missed. The other caught a man clean through the cheekbone, screaming. The others ducked. Ash grabbed Ruth's arm. They ran. Back through the scattered cabins. Smoke curling now as someone torched a roof behind them. A last trick, confusion. Ruth moved like a fox, swift, small, invisible. Ash covered her, gun heavy in his grip, heart hammering slow and hard. Every footfall felt like the beat of a drum he'd been marching to for years. They hit the edge of the camp just as a rider came in from the north trail. Egan Carrick. Broad-chested, long rifle slung across his back, a snake tattooed down one arm. He dismounted fast and drew. Ash barely had time to shout. Ruth was faster. She threw her knife, but it skidded wide. Egan raised the rifle. Ash took the bullet in the side. He hit the ground hard, breath knocked from him, pain like fire under his ribs. Ruth screamed, ran for him, tried to pull him up. Egan laughed. "Old bastard, should have stayed buried." He stepped forward, rifle leveled. Then Ruth picked up the Colt. She fired. The bullet hit Egan in the throat. He fell backwards without a sound. Ruth stood over Ash, shaking, the revolver slipping from her hand. Blood ran from his side, hot and dark. "You're not dying here," she said. Ash coughed, eyes fluttering. "Cora," he whispered. But Ruth was already moving. She tore strips from her cloak, pressed them to the wound. Somewhere in the distance, more shouting. Men, maybe the last of the Carrick holdouts. Maybe townsfolk stirred by gunfire, maybe worse. Ruth dragged Ash behind an overturned cart, breath ragged. He grabbed her wrist. "Listen to me," he rasped. "There's a ledger in the house. Back room, floorboard under the cot. Take it. Names, deeds, bribes, everything. I'm not leaving you. You have to. That's how you finish this." "No." Ash's eyes were glassy. "You want them to pay. That book tears the rest of them down. It's not just these bastards. It's the law, the judges, the buyers, all of them." Ruth swallowed hard, nodded once. "I'll come back," she said. She ran. Ash lay still, gun loose in his fingers, blood pooling under him. He stared at the sky and thought about the river, the saplings, the sound of Cora laughing in summer. The sun burned overhead, indifferent. Inside the house, Ruth moved like shadow. She found the cot, the board, the book. Outside, gunshots cracked again. But this time, they weren't aimed at her. They were aimed at the Carricks. A group of riders had come from the east, men in dusters. One of them held a U.S. Marshal badge. Maybe they'd followed the noise. Maybe Ruth had slipped a signal somewhere. Maybe the wind had finally turned. They swarmed the compound fast. Ruth watched from inside, clutching the ledger. She saw Sila's Carrick dragged into the open, hands bound, blood on his teeth. One of the marshals shouted, "Get the girl. She's the one who brought it down." She didn't run. She walked out slow, ledger under her arm, eyes on the man with the badge. "I want a trade," she said. The man raised an eyebrow. "What kind?" "You take this and you take the bodies. But the man bleeding by the cart, he rides out with us, or no one gets anything." The marshal hesitated, then nodded. Behind her, the ridge burned, black smoke curling toward heaven like some kind of offering. Ash blinked as they lifted him onto a wagon. His lips barely moved. "What happened?" he whispered. Ruth leaned close. "They're finished," she said. "We're not." The wound festered. 3 days east of Oxblood Ridge, the wagon rolled through cottonwood groves and dry creeks, cutting south where the land dipped into the flats. Ash lay in the back, half conscious, sweat soaking the blanket they'd wrapped him in. The bullet had passed through clean, but the fever came anyway, creeping slow and mean like something that remembered his name. Ruth drove the team. Her hands, though blistered, held the reins steady. She didn't speak unless she had to, and the marshal's men, who rode behind on tired horses, gave her a wide berth. Whatever she'd done at the ridge, however many men they'd seen her cut down or outsmart, they knew better than to treat her like a child. They made camp each night in silence. No fire, no chatter. The book, the ledger, sat wrapped in oilcloth beside Ruth while she sharpened her blades or boiled strips of cloth in a blackened pot. She cleaned ashes, wound the way he'd shown her, jaw tight, eyes hard. She fed him bitter root water and kept the flies from his lips. He drifted in and out, whispering names she didn't recognize, some dead, some maybe not yet. By the 6th night, the marshals grew restless. Their leader, a hollow-chested man named Tolley, sat across from Ruth, picking grit from under his nails. You don't need him anymore, he said. We got what we came for. That ledger's gonna buy a lot of nooses for a lot of bad men. Ruth didn't look up. You wouldn't have it if not for him. Tolly laughed. You handed it over. He was just bleeding in the dirt. Ruth's knife hit the ground between his boots. He froze. She looked up then, eyes like stone. You say one more thing like that, she said, and I'll carve your tongue out and feed it to the crows. Tolly didn't speak again that night. The next morning, Ash opened his eyes. Not wide, not all the way, but enough. You did it, he rasped. Ruth leaned close. We both did. His hand found hers, cold, weak, but real. Cora, he whispered. Ruth shook her head. I found no one at the ridge, only ledgers, only men. Ash turned his face toward the sunrise. The wind smelled different out here, not cleaner, just empty. When they reached Whitestone, the marshals peeled off toward the courthouse, ledger in hand. Ruth and Ash stayed behind, holing up in a crooked little house on the edge of town. It belonged to a widow who took one look at the scar on Ash's side and waved them inside without a word. For days he slept. Ruth hunted rabbits, kept watch, listened to gossip. Word had spread. Names from the ledger were already swinging from gallows across 3 counties. Judges, bankers, foremen, not just the carracks, but the men who made them strong. Justice had come, but it didn't feel clean. When Ash could finally walk again, they sat under a sagging porch as the sun dropped red behind the hills. She was pregnant, he said, voice raw. Ruth didn't answer. I never found out if it was a boy or girl. I buried Ash's, that's all, but I always wondered. Maybe it was both, Ruth said. Ash gave a slow, ragged laugh. Maybe. She turned to him. What now? I thought I'd die there. That was the plan. No point going past revenge. You didn't die. No. Then make a new plan. Ash looked out at the horizon, where the land bled into the sky. I don't know how, he said. Ruth leaned back, arms crossed. Then learn, you taught me how to kill, how to ride, how to read men before they draw their guns. He didn't speak. So now I'll teach you how to live. He looked at her, and for the first time there wasn't just pain behind his eyes. There was weariness. There was ruin, but also something else, something small and stubborn. A hope. Later that night, the widow brought them stew. They ate in silence. Outside, cicadas buzzed. A dog barked somewhere down the road. Ordinary sounds, not gunfire, not screams. Ash sat with his boots off for the first time in weeks. Ruth cleaned her blade, careful, like always. He watched her a moment. You could go your own way now. You don't owe me anything. She didn't look up. You said that once before. I meant it. I didn't leave then. I'm not leaving now. He nodded. You're not my daughter, he said. No, but you're something. She smiled barely. So are you. Ash didn't sleep that night. He stood at the window watching stars. He'd set the fire, killed the men who'd earned their deaths, but the world didn't feel any cleaner. The ash still clung to him. The difference was, now, he wasn't alone. A week later, a letter came from the courthouse. Tolly's handwriting, tight and slanted. The ledger broke them wide open. We're chasing the rest. You were right. The girl's name will be remembered. Ash folded the paper and handed it to Ruth. She read it once, then tore it into 4 pieces and let the wind take it. I don't need them to remember me, she said. I only need to remember what they did. Ash picked up his hat. His wound still ached, but he stood tall enough. Let's ride, he said. Where to? He shrugged, where no one knows our names. Ruth grinned, we'll fix that. They rode west, no trail, no map, just the wind behind them and the sun ahead. The revenge was over, but the story was. The towns thinned as they rode west. Fences gave way to open country, and open country gave way to nothing but stone and sky. It was a land too wild for the law to follow, too wide for memory to hold fast. The kind of place where names dissolved into dust and even blood soaked in without a trace. They passed no signposts. Ruth led sometimes now, her shoulders squared, eyes scanning ridgelines the way Ash once had. Her knife stayed strapped to her thigh, her hands had calluses, her voice had weight. Ash followed slower on his horse. The wound had closed, but it left behind a limp that grew worse in the cold. He didn't complain. Some pains are meant to be carried. They remind you you're still here. One evening they came upon a burned-out chapel sitting crooked atop a bluff. Its steeple was gone, the bell rusted through and half swallowed by prairie grass. Someone had painted over the old wood with charcoal black crosses, faded now, but angry once. Ruth dismounted and stepped inside, boots soft on the broken boards. Ash waited outside, listening to wind sift through the empty frame. She returned with a book in her hand, a hymnal, pages mostly torn out. Only the back cover remained, where someone had carved a name. Who was it? Ash asked. She shook her head. Doesn't matter. She fed the book to the fire that night, watched it curl and flake until only blackened spine and embers remained. Ash didn't speak, but he understood. Some stories don't need retelling. Some names are better off forgotten. They crossed into New Mexico territory under a new moon. Water grew scarce, and so did trust. The last town they'd stopped in had a crooked preacher who offered blessings for a coin and bullets for a drink. Ash watched Ruth handle him, flat voice, hand never leaving her knife. The man never blinked again when they passed. After that, she stopped smiling altogether. Ash caught her one night staring into the fire, lips moving without sound. Praying, he asked. No. Thinking. She nodded. What about? I used to believe revenge would fill me, or burn out the hollow. But I still wake up angry, still see the ridge, still see him lying there in the dust. Ash looked into the flames. It never leaves, you just grow strong enough to carry it. She tossed another stick into the fire. You ever wish you died back there? She asked. He paused. Sometimes, but not lately. She didn't answer, didn't have to. They kept riding. Weeks passed, the horses grew thinner. They picked up odd jobs in fringe towns, herding cattle, fixing fences, delivering letters for men too proud to carry them themselves. They didn't stay long in one place. They didn't leave names behind. One morning, Ruth handed Ash a folded scrap of paper, a bounty notice, crumpled and faded, but the face was familiar, Sela's Carrick. Somehow he'd crawled out from the hangman's rope. They hadn't got him all. Do we chase it? She asked. Ash looked at her. She wasn't the girl from the fire anymore. She wasn't even the girl from the ridge. She was something else now. "Do you need to?" he asked. She stared at the paper, then tossed it into the wind. "No." He smiled, the kind that didn't ache. That night they stopped at the edge of a dry lake bed. The sky stretched wider than anything Ruth had seen before, all stars and silence. Ash unrolled his blanket, groaning as he eased down. "Gonna rain soon," he muttered. "Sky clear," Ruth said. "That's why." She smiled just a little. In the morning they found a boy on the trail. Barefoot, hollow-eyed, same look Ruth once had, same silence. He had a rusted knife in one hand and nothing else. They didn't ask questions. Ash handed him a piece of jerky. Ruth offered the mule's lead. They didn't ask where he'd come from. He followed them without a word. That evening, Ruth taught him how to sharpen a blade without dulling the edge. Ash showed him how to aim with the weight of the gun, not the sight. They moved slow now, but not aimless. The boy never spoke, not for weeks, but he listened. When they reached the canyon rim, where the earth split open like a scar too deep to heal, they stopped. Ash dismounted, stood there a long while, wind tugging at his coat. Ruth came up beside him. "This it?" she asked. He nodded, "Far as I go." She didn't argue. The boy sat behind them, whittling a stick into something shapeless. Ash turned to her. His voice had gone thin, but not weak. "Don't bury me." She frowned. "Why?" "Because the land already tried once. Let the buzzards try this time." She nodded, no tears, no softness. "Just respect." He handed her his Colt, the one that had killed the Carracks, the one that still bore Cora's initials scratched into the grip. "You earned it," he said. She took it." Ash lay down beneath a cedar, twisted by time. He didn't say goodbye. He just looked out at the horizon, where the sun was low and golden, and everything seemed so far behind. He closed his eyes. The wind blew steady. And Ruth rode on. She had no home, no banner, no cause left to raise, but she had the colt, she had the boy, and she had the road. That was enough. The world would not remember their names, but it would never forget what they'd done.